In many respects, Western Christianity has taught us to think in dualistic, either or paradigms of thinking. Things are good, things are evil. Something is sinful, something is righteous. Someone is saved, someone else is lost. Right? Certain things are absolutely correct and right, and others are absolutely wrong. My reading of Scripture, of the Bible, is right, and if you disagree with me, you must be wrong. Right? We're taught that there is one faithful answer, and much of the history of the 2,000-year plus church, right, is to discover and defend the one true way. The problem is, that's not how the world actually works. Right? That's not our experience of the world. It's not reality. Right? Much of the world is not painted in absolutes, but in shades of gray. Almost everything is more complicated and nuanced than we give credit for. And when we begin to allow ourselves to fall into this kind of binary, dualistic thinking, we end up embracing a fundamentalism of either the left or the right that is toxic and destructive and not in the way of Jesus, not in the way of love, not in the way of the kingdom of God. We are in week 3 of a series here at Riverfront Family Church called Community Killers. And really what we're looking at during this series are 9 characteristics, 9 attitudes, 9 kind of beliefs, 9 paradigms that destroy community and are characteristic of white supremacist culture. And so yes, for 9 weeks we are talking about racism, and we are talking about white privilege and white supremacist culture and the toxicity that comes from that. And we're talking about it because we believe first and foremost that white supremacist culture is a real thing that negatively impacts all of us. And second, that the church should be at the forefront of talking about these complicated, difficult issues. And so that's why we've committed this amount of time to having this conversation. Paul Kivel, theologian, writes this. People are not good or bad. We are each complex, not easily summarized or dismissed by a judgment. We may do things that are illegal, immoral, unhealthy, or thoughtless. But that doesn't make us bad people. And we know good people are sometimes not what they seem. We may even internalize judgment and believe that we are good or bad people. We fall into the sense of moral judgment. And again, of this either or binary thinking. And kind of the idea is that this binary thinking, this dualism, always presents issues or options as either or, good, bad, right, wrong. You're either with us or you're against us. Right? And we have very little sense often of the possibilities of both and. It's really a mindset that's trying to simplify complex things. An example might be this, right? And we want to believe that poverty is the result of lack of education, for example. Or poverty is the result of lack of people, of work skills or work opportunities, or of people not wanting to work certain kinds of jobs, right? And so we come up with these kind of these either or dualistic, simplistic answers. But the truth is, when we begin to study poverty, it is an incredibly complex problem. Right? There are systemic causes of poverty. There's certainly things in the educational system. When you study, you begin to see that public transportation and transportation systems and other things all are part of poverty, and there are these cycles of poverty, and there are different levels of poverty, and it's actually a really complex issue. Now, this kind of binary thinking is closely linked to the kind of perfectionism that Pastor Liza talked about last week. And when we have this kind of binary thinking, it becomes difficult for us to have these complex conversations and to learn from our mistakes and to have healthy conflict. Right? We often, when we talk about race and racism, it kind of the conversation diminishes and falls apart upon, oh, so you're calling me a racist, or you think I'm a racist, or I'm not a racist, right? As if the only question is whether you are or are not a racist, if that's like the thing, the only conversation. But it's a so much more complex issue, right? When we begin to consider the systemic issues around us and some of our histories and our narratives and our stories and our assumptions, and it's actually a really complex conversation. And it's a community killer to fall into this binary thinking, because when we fall into that kind of thinking, it kills the conversation. And when we kill the conversation, when we can no longer have these real conversations, all right, community is destroyed. And so this series is not about making anyone feel badly. This is not a series where we're trying to assign blame and say that certain people are racist or not racist. This series is about exploring the toxic vinegar, right? Do you remember my pickle analogy from week 1? The toxic vinegar that surrounds us all and is pickling us all. And that all of us are hurt by this kind of a culture. No matter who we are, what our perceived color, what our background, what our ethnicity is, where we are economically, all of us suffer and are hurt by the toxicity of white supremacy. And one characteristic is kind of this artificial dualism, this kind of binary thinking. And it means that we can't even have the conversation. When we use this kind of either or language, it forces people, right, to kind of draw lines in the sand. And we know that that's not a healthy way to have conflict or conversation. Right? When we simplify complex issues, we begin to assign blame instead of digging under the surface to discover solutions. When we force our own ethical and moral thinking into either or, right, we begin to ostracize and stigmatize certain groups and characteristics and types of people in ways that allow us easily to dismiss them and to dismiss their issues and their concerns and their pushback. If we can only think in terms of absolute right and absolute wrong, really the conversation ends. And we're no better than the 24/7 cable news networks that are just shouting at each other. But here at Riverfront, for the sake of our community and the greater Hartford community and the broader church community, our desire is to be in authentic relationship and community with each other. And that means having difficult and complex and nuanced conversations. That means not shying away from those conversations. And so we want to embrace and lean into a more complex and nuanced view of these issues. Theologian Richard Rohr reflects on it this way. More than with any other personality trait in my life, all or nothing thinking has caused me to make huge mistakes and bad judgments, hurt people and myself, withhold love, and misinterpret situations. And this pattern of dualistic thinking is deeply entrenched in most Western people, despite its severe limitations. Binary thinking is completely inadequate for the major questions and dilemmas of life. He goes on to reflect. He says, a binary system of either or choices produced the scientific industrial revolutions that have served us so well in many areas, but these have begun to show their severe limitations. And this mind can take us only so far. It cannot access eternal things. It is not the tree of life, but only the tree of this or that. And it's very powerful. And in some ways, there's something pragmatic about either or thinking. And if there's anything historically that Americans are, right, we're pragmatists. We're radical pragmatists. But that pragmatism begins to fall apart if you can't simply categorize either or, left, right, wrong, in, out. Activist and theologian Kai Cheng Tom puts it this way. As a whole, we have a tendency to escalate rather than de-escalate conflict. In our rightful desire to ensure that harm is not minimized or ignored, we use inflammatory language, binary concepts of right and wrong, and oversimplified narratives that more often than not increase tension and heighten rage and shame. We do not ask the questions that are central to transformative justice. Why has harm occurred? Who is responsible beyond the individual perpetrator, as in, how is the community implicated? How can this harm be prevented in the future? These are the core questions that we should be asking, but when we get stuck assigning blame, we fall into this left, right, wrong. It's a disaster. And the practice of Christianity has too often fallen into this kind of dualism. Right, wrong, saved, not saved, sinful, not sinful. And we weaponize this kind of dualism. Both in the fundamentalism of the left and of the right. Because fundamentalism exists on both extremes and always thrives in an environment of binary thinking and dualism. It's a necessary ingredient for that kind of dangerous and radical extremism that is fundamentalism. But ironically, this is actually not what we find modeled for us in the scriptures at all. For example, the Apostle Paul, wrestling with a complex ethical dilemma from his day, does not settle for either or binary dualistic answers. 1 Corinthians chapter 8, and if you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn there. 1 Corinthians chapter 8, and I'm picking up in verse 1. Now, about food sacrificed to idols, we know that we all possess knowledge. But knowledge puffs up, while love builds up. Those who think they know something do not yet know as they ought to know. But whoever loves God is known by God. Verse 4. So then, about eating food sacrificed to idols. We know that an idol is nothing at all in the world, and that there is no God but one. For even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, and gods plural, so like other gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as indeed there are many gods, Paul writes, and many lords, yet for us there is but one God, the Father, from whom all things came and from whom we live, and there is but one Lord, Jesus the Christ, through whom all things came and through whom we live. But not everyone possesses this knowledge, Paul writes. Some people are still so accustomed to idols that when they eat sacrificial food, they think of it as having been sacrificed to a god. And since their conscience is weak, it's defiled. But food, verse 8, but food does not bring us near to God. We are no worse if we do not eat, and no better if we do. Be careful, however, that the exercise of your rights does not become a stumbling block to the weak. For if someone with a weak conscience sees you, with all your knowledge, eating in an idol's temple, won't that person be emboldened to eat what is sacrificed to idols? So this weak brother or sister or sibling for whom Christ died is destroyed by your knowledge. When you sin against them in this way and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if what I eat causes my brother or sister to fall into sin, I will never eat meat again, so I will not cause them to fall. What's the discussion here? What's going on? Well, Corinth, the city of Corinth, right, is a complex city with lots of diversity and different beliefs spiritually. So as people in Corinth came to know Christ and came into the church, they're coming with all different kinds of backgrounds. One of the things that was true in Corinth is that there was animal sacrifice to different gods within the pagan world. Right? And the question, the ethical question, was whether a Christian, a follower of Jesus, right, could eat meat sacrificed to these gods or not. And here's Paul's answer. Maybe. It depends. Yes, no, possible. Paul refuses to give an either-or, absolute, dualistic, binary answer. Instead, what he does, and it's fascinating in this passage, what he does is he leads the people of Corinth through a process of how to think about complex ethical issues. I mean, Paul had authority. He could have simply said, yes, you can eat meat sacrificed to idols. Or he could have said, no, you can't. But he refuses to do that. Instead, he sets a framework for how we think about these issues and allows for multiple faithful answers to the same question. Did he get that? The Apostle Paul, St. Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament, allows for the notion, the idea, that there are multiple possible faithful answers to the same question. In other words, our desire as Christians, as followers of Jesus, to discover the one absolute answer to whatever the question is. Infant baptism versus believer baptism. What do we believe about the sacraments and about communion? Right? Should the church be congregational or Episcopalian? Should we have bishops or should we have local control? Right? All these kinds of complex questions. And we long for easy answers. But Paul says, no. Here's how I want you to think about these complex issues. Right? Because it's not dualistic. There's not an absolute right or wrong here. Paul's saying essentially, look, if you believe that there's power in these idols and that the food sacrifice somehow therefore is like tainted and it's going to weigh on your conscience, well, that's a kind of a weaker theology than I have personally, Paul says, but then you shouldn't eat it. But if your view, like mine, is that idols are actually not real, that they're not really gods at all, that there's no power to them, well then enjoy the roasted lamb with no guilt. However, if you're in a group, if you're part of a community, and there's a group of people within that community for whom you eating the lamb is going to be a problem, Paul says that the integrity of the community actually matters more than your individual right and prerogative. Whoa. Think about that. That is like so contrary to our American mindset, right? We are such radical, rugged individuals who believe that our individual freedoms are everything. But here Paul is saying, no. There are times where you're going to give up your individual freedoms for the sake of the community and for the sake of what he describes as the weakest of our community. these are complex ideas. There are multiple faithful answers. We can all read this passage. If we are in the community at Corinth, we could read this, and one of us might conclude that it's okay to eat the roast lamb. Another may conclude that it's absolutely not okay to eat it. A third might come to the conclusion that I would only eat it if I'm in the presence of other people for whom it's not an issue. But if I'm in with people for whom it is an issue, then I'll abstain. A fourth conclusion might be that because there might be someone for whom it offends and is a stumbling block, out of a great precaution for my siblings, I will not eat and I'll be a vegetarian. Right? So that's four possible answers. I'm sure there's a fifth and a sixth and a seventh. And what Paul says is all of those are possible, faithful answers. In other words, he rejects the dualism, the binary thinking that's really much more part of Greco-Roman Western thought than Judeo-Eastern thought. In fact, the world of Paul and of Jesus and the early church, culturally, in terms of their hermeneutics and their approach to scripture and life, was actually much more not binary, not absolute. They don't fall into that westernized, almost Aristotelian culture that we've inherited. And so it's ironic that so much of our world, so much of modern American Christianity is more defined by a Western philosophy of dualism than it is by what we find modeled for us in the scriptures. We should embrace the model of Paul that rejects fundamentalism. We should embrace the model of Paul that rejects binary thinking. We should embrace the model of Paul that embraces the idea of nuance and complexity and the idea of multiple faithful answers. I mean, think about, not just in terms of white supremacist culture, but think about in just church culture. The number of divisions and schisms that have been created simply by this kind of dualistic thinking. Church break-offs and breakups and schisms that happen because of fights around these issues. Questions historically around the sacraments, or back in the day in the book of Acts about Gentiles being circumcised. But in our day, it has to do with everything, right? We argue about things like abortion and euthanasia, and we argue about drug legalization and the educational policy and policies to alleviate poverty and all these different things, and we fall into these back and forth and extreme positions, and often more informed, by the way, by politics than theology. But what we do is we draw ourselves into a box. And when we draw ourselves into a box, we can no longer actually learn or grow or experience authentic community. And again, when we weaponize this duality, this binary thinking, it helps reinforce much of what white supremacist culture purposely creates. If you're poor, it must be your fault. It rejects kind of the intersectional study that allows us to look at the connections between socioeconomic status and race and social policy and structural issues. It's what allows us to ignore things like environmental racism and the ways that even in the early 40s, 50s, 60s, how our national highway systems were developed and the unintended consequences of some of those decisions that were made, but how they reinforced and how we kind of thought of other and in and black and white and there was different values involved, and we ended up destroying cities. Right, Hartford is an example of that, right? The way Route 84 and 91 come through and divide the north end from the rest of the city, that has had destructive, huge implications on the population of Hartford and the ways that the highways cut us off from the Connecticut River. Right, it had huge implications, and let's be honest, racial implications, ones that we're feeling to this day, and we're going to be complex and expensive to fix. We have to drop the simplistic, dualistic, binary thinking that allows ourselves to color ourselves into the corner, to draw lines in the sand that undercut any capacity to have real and authentic conversations. And it's critical that we drop this kind of binary thinking in our hermeneutics and in our exegesis and in our approach to the scriptures and our approach to theology. We need to learn to embrace multiple faithful answers. We can conclude differently. We can disagree with each other. And that doesn't make one of us more faithful than the other. There can be multiple faithful answers. As I close tonight, I want to share with you kind of a long story, but I think it's an important story. From a woman who's been involved in the work of anti-racism for a long time. Here's what she writes. I'm on my feet, shifting my weight from one to the other, spine swaying slightly, in a circle of 16 people. We are all of us standing in front of folding chairs, also set in a circle. Chairs which have held us securely for 2.5 days in this large, sunny meeting on the outskirts of Atlanta. I'm one of 3 facilitators invited by a social justice nonprofit to lead them through a dismantling racism curriculum. A curriculum that I helped develop and revise and refine over the past 30 years with a diverse and brilliant group of colleagues. Now, in this particular afternoon, my collaborators, who I'll call E and J, stand to my left. The 3 of us claim our space as the physically solid and confident women that we are. E's black skin is clothed in wide-leg pants and loosely fitting shirt, topped with an African multicolored scarf. Her ears are decorated with cowrie shells, her strong features uncharacteristically still in a face that is often laughing, wide-mouthed, and hearty. Jay is the slightest of the 3 of us. Her white, athletic body arrayed in her characteristic outfit of close-fitting pants and pullover shirt. Her straight hair framing a face with delicately strong features, which appears serious until she breaks into a smile. Now, I fill out the trio, older than the other 2 by at least 20 years, in a white body that is short and sturdy, with my gray hair growing longer over a broad face that becomes close to beautiful when I laugh. We are working together, the 3 of us, because E and J invited to bring my 3 decades of experience to a facilitation that they are in the process of learning. I accepted their invitation because I wanted to work with these 2 thoughtful, wise, thoroughly engaging women, knowing I would learn as much from them as they possibly could from me. Now, closing the circle on either side of us are the participants in this workshop, all of whom are staff or board or members of an organization working to coordinate the efforts of social justice groups that serve the city. Standing to my right are 2 African-American men, both in their 20s. The rest of the circle holds 3 African-American women, also young, and the rest are white, young, older, and in between. They include Nellie, a young white woman in her early 20s, who has just joined the staff in an administrative role. Now, Nellie's a bit shorter than the three of us, her face serious and attentive, her stout and beautiful body filling out a colorful top, her round arms offering a rainbow of tattoos. She is new to social justice work and appears excited about finding her place in this new role. Now, we close every workshop in a circle like this, asking all who've attended to stand if they choose, sit if they choose. We ask each person to name a commitment they are ready and willing to make to address the inequities we have named and explored over the last 2.5 days. We wait for whoever wants to start, sharing to do so, and then allow the responses to travel around the circle. The white person standing to Jay's left starts. She declares a will to work harder to catch her assumptions about one right way, which is one of the characteristics of white supremacy culture named in the workshop. The young black man next to her says he plans to reach out to more young men like himself, both to build the organization and to meet his own needs for support. Then Nellie's turn comes and she pronounces, "I commit to empowering people of color in the organization and in the community." In the silence, after her words fade, I glance quickly at Jay. She catches the glance. I look next at E, who stares straight ahead into the circle, impassive. My glance with Jay relays a concern, one I see reflected in her eyes, that Nellie has just made a commitment that is not really hers to make. Our shared glance occurs in the space of a few seconds and reflects an acknowledgement that we're going to have to address Nellie's comment in some way. We both bring our attention back to the group, which has continued to share intentions. We close the workshop with another round of appreciations for our time together, and the circle breaks. Some people move quickly to retrieve their belongings and return to their family or work obligations. Some linger to talk with each other, and others begin the task of cleaning up the room. I walk over to Jay, and after checking in with E, we agree that I'll talk with Nellie. I approach, stop in front of Nellie, place my hand lightly on her arm, and ask if we can talk for a few minutes. She agrees, and I suggest we move to the side of the room so we can talk more privately. "Nellie, I think we may not have done a good job. I say this because if we had done our job well, we would have made it more clear that as white people, we do not have the responsibility or even the ability, really, to help empower people of color. What we can do is empower ourselves. And what we can do is act in solidarity with people of color as they work together to empower themselves. Together, we empower each other." Does that make sense? She looks at me, eyes wide, quickly filling with tears. Then what am I doing here? She asked, in an almost plaintive wail. How am I supposed to help? I spend the next 20 minutes trying a variety of logics to get the idea across that we, the white ones, do not want to reproduce a familiar dynamic, one where we assume we are the empowered, destined to help the poor and the powerless racial other in order to lift them up to our level. I acknowledge her good intentions. I talk about how we, as white people, have plenty of our own work to do. I explain the difference between a notion of helping, which too often assumes that we are somehow qualified to help those who are less than. I suggest a subtle difference between the kind of helping and an admission that those of us who are white are ourselves deeply damaged and confused. I make the point that if anything, BIPOC people and communities are in a better position to help us see how white supremacy and racism have conditioned us into unhealthy attitudes and behaviors. And as I talk, Nellie continues to cry. When I ask her what she's feeling, She can only say over and over again that she doesn't know what she's supposed to do if she can't help. And nothing I say penetrates Nellie's distress, and finally I admit defeat. At least for now, my intellectual arguments are no match for her deeply embodied emotion. I'm not myself skilled enough, even after all my years of working with this material, to support her to identify the real source of her distress. Her sense that either she can help the racialized other in the way she has defined help, or she can't. Binary thinking. She leaves our conversation deeply upset and disrupted by my challenge to her attachment to this idea. Before I continue my story, let me be clear. I'm not suggesting we cannot help each other tap into our personal and collective power and across lines of race. Nor am I suggesting that our racial identities prescribe what we can and cannot do for each other, even across different lived experiences. I am, though, tackling this idea that the primary role of white people is to help in the way that Nellie meant. Our culture discourages the unquestioned assumption that we, the white ones, are the baseline against which everyone else is measured. Our culture encourages the unquestioned assumption that our very whiteness means we hold the necessary qualifications to uplift and empower those we have continuously disregarded, violated, and thrown away, both physically and psychically. And I notice how often we get stuck in the either-or binary, which in this case is playing out as, if I can't do what I thought, then there's no role for me here. Either I can help or I can't. Investigating the complexity of help is not an option we can even perceive. I reach out to Nellie several times in the following weeks, only to be met with resounding silence. Those of us who are white are deeply invested, many of us, in the narrative that we are the normal ones with an obligation to help. We are deeply conditioned into the belief you are uniquely qualified to fix the problems we created in the first place. We are almost never encouraged in this culture to realize that we are also and actually the broken ones. Brothers, sisters, siblings, together, we need to be having these difficult and complex and nuanced conversations because we are all broken. We are all part of this toxic culture. I remember when we started the RJAT experience, one of the things that one of the facilitators said in one of the sessions is that if your motivation, if your why for being here is to help, your motivation is wrong. And at first that was confusing, and in some ways I reacted the way Nellie did. Right? If I can't help, why am I here? But what I was missing was that I needed to be in a place where I could understand and see and acknowledge and own my own brokenness, my own complicity, in a toxic culture that was damaging people around me, that was doing significant and deep damage to the people of color in my life and in my community, but was also damaging my own soul. White supremacist culture hurts me too, and it hurts you. And it destroys the relationships and the kind of community and the kind of world that I envision and long for and pray for as a follower of Jesus. And I want to tell you that it does that for you too. So wherever you are on the spectrum, whether you identify as white or as a person of color, I want you to know that white supremacist culture is evil, it is sinful, it is toxic, It is destructive, and it is not of God. And I want to invite you tonight to begin to shift a paradigm from duality and either or thinking to embracing the kind of model and approach that the Apostle Paul modeled for us in Corinthians. And so I ask you simply two questions as we close tonight. Where are you prone to dualistic binary thinking in your own life? In your politics, in your ethics, in your theology, in your relationships, in your approach to social justice issues? Where in your life are you prone to dualistic binary thinking? And two, how can you shift out of that paradigm? What would need to happen for you to make that shift? Who can help you? Who do you need to kind of talk to and bring on board to help you with that process? Maybe it's maybe it's your huddle, or it's your small group, or it's your book club, or it's a close friend, or your spouse. I don't know who it is, but who's going to help you make that shift? So two questions. Where are you prone to this kind of thinking? And how will you make the shift? And as a third application tonight, I want to both invite you and challenge you. I really hope that you'll come out or come online Thursday night to be part of our community conversation. And I want to say up front that that's going to be a little bit of a vulnerable time. It'll be a challenging time. But if you're feeling like this series is kind of pushing some buttons and you're not really sure how to respond, I hope you'll come be part of the conversation. And if you're at a place where you are, let's say if you're a person of color in our congregation, you're thinking, so the last thing I want to do on a Thursday night is listen to a bunch of white people pontificate about white supremacy. I get it. But I hope you'll still come out as well. Because we need each other. We need each other. We need each other's voices. We need each other's perspectives. We need to understand each other's narratives. We need each other to encourage it. We need each other on this journey. Will you make that commitment to me? Will you wrestle with those questions? Will you wrestle with and embrace the model that Paul has given us, that there can be multiple faithful answers? And as you continue to pursue Jesus, and his way, I pray that the Spirit of God would empower you to be transformed from dualistic binary thinking into the world of complex, nuanced, complicated, messy thinking that allows for multiple faithful answers, allows for learning, allows for transformation, allows for healing and hope and holiness and the sacred. Amen.